Chapter 15. The meeting. Lydia woke up but didn't open her eyes. She didn't want to move any part of her body because she would only make the pain in her chest worse. She could hardly breathe. It felt as if a sumo wrestler was sitting on her, and her arm was throbbing badly. Lydia forced her eyes to open and sat up slowly. Her breathing became easier, but her head felt as if it had just tripled in weight. Lydia looked around. Mike was lying on the floor across the room. Mike, are you okay? Lydia stood up. Pain lanced through her arm, making her gasp. She clutched her left arm and stumbled across the room toward him. Mike! Lydia squatted down. Mike opened his eyes, then sat up so quickly that Lydia had to jump back. He leapt to his feet. Where are we? He asked, looking around. I don't know. Lydia looked around as well. She was in a room unlike any she'd seen so far in this time. It had wood panelling on the walls instead of wallpaper, and the furniture looked antique. A huge, ornate mirror dominated one wall of the room. Even the door was old-fashioned, kind of made of wood instead of the sliding kind made of metal. We're in his mansion, Mike whispered. He ran to the door and tried to open it. It was locked. Lydia ran over to the curtains. Maybe they could escape by breaking the windows. Steel bars protected the glass, both inside and outside the window frame. So much for that idea. What are we going to do? Lydia asked. We have to get out of here. I've got to let the resistance know that the tyrant knows about our tunnel into his estate. Mike said desperately. How did he find out? Asked Lydia. There's no way he could have found out. Unless there's a traitor in the resistance, Mike said slowly. But if he knows about the tunnel, why didn't he just close it down? Lydia asked. Mike laughed grimly. Because he's clever. Because he's waiting for the resistance to launch their attack, and then he'll pick them off one by one, just as he did to us. Lydia's arm dropped to her side. She was in Daniel Henson's house, where she had wanted to be, but suddenly the prospect of meeting him filled her with fear, which burnt like acid. Lydia rubbed her moist palms into her crumpled jeans. I'm scared, she admitted. Listen, the first chance one of us gets, we've got to make a break for it and warn the others, said Mike. Head for the woods. Lydia nodded. She understood perfectly. Just at that moment, the door opened and 2 night guards marched in. Lydia stepped back quickly. It was the first time she'd seen them close up. They were dressed in grey, all in one suits, and they wore grey helmets like motorcycle helmets, with visors so dark that Lydia couldn't see their faces. You, one night guard said, pointing to Lydia. Come with us. Lydia took another quick step backwards. She looked around quickly. There had to be somewhere to run, somewhere to hide. Her shoulders slumped. There was nowhere. The guard didn't ask a second time. He stepped over Lydia and seized her by the left arm. Lydia howled in agony, but he didn't let her go of anything. His grip tightened. Lydia's arm was on fire again, worse than before. She tried to pull away, but it was impossible. Let her go, Mike tried to help, but the second night guard stood between him and Lydia. Without saying another word, the first guard marched Lydia out of the room. Turning left, he strode down the corridor, past closed wooden doors on either side, towards the huge double doors at the far end of the corridor. He opened one door and thrust Lydia into the room. Lydia stumbled, fell. The door shut behind her with a resounding thud. Lydia filled her mouth with saliva and told herself over and over again, your left arm doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt. Her mum had told her once that this was a good way to stop aches and pains. You had to fill your mouth with saliva and tell yourself that a specific pain in a specific place wasn't there and didn't hurt. Her mum had called it mind over matter. Strangely enough, after a few deep breaths, the pain in her arm did lessen slightly. Lydia stood up, still telling herself that her arm didn't hurt. She swallowed hard, looked around. The room was dark, but not frightening. The only light came from a huge fire at the other end of the room. To her left was a window partially covered with thick, heavy curtains which hung down to the wooden parquet floor. Books and more books filled the shelves which reached the floor from ceiling to every wall. Come over here. The command made Lydia jump. She thought she was alone. She turned but couldn't see anyone. The high-backed chair was positioned in front of the fire. Slowly the chair swiveled around. Come over here. An oldish man with greying hair and a white speckled moustache beckoned her over. Slowly, Lydia did as she was told. The man turned in his chair. back to the fire. As Lydia approached, so that she had to walk around him, the moment Lydia was close enough, the man placed his hand under her chin and tilted her head towards the firelight. He tilted it upwards and leaned it away from him. "Lydia," he whispered softly. Lydia pulled her head away and stared at the man. His voice was deep. Even sitting down, he was taller than Lydia. He was wearing a dark jumper and what looked like corduroy jeans. This man was solid, with a broad chest and a hard face. But there was no doubt about it. Lydia recognised his eyes at once. The same eyes that had stared at her from the view screen in Fran's house. The same eyes as hers. She wanted to throw her arms around him and hug him, but there was someone she didn't recognise. He was her brother, but the words of every person she'd met since her accident on the moors kept darting around her mind. The tyrant. He despises us. He controls the night guards. Murderer. Tyrant. Lydia didn't know what to do or say, so she said and did nothing. Long moments of intense silence passed, broken only by the crackling and spitting of the log fire. "Pull up a chair while I check on your friend," the man said at last. And he held up a remote control and pointed it at the wall above a fireplace. A small view screen suddenly flickered into life. Lydia saw Mike pulling at the window bars of the room she'd just been in. "I've got to get out of here," Mike puffed as he pulled and pulled. Lydia turned to the man and he smiled with amusement and pressed another button on his remote control. Mike's image vanished. Lydia walked towards the nearest chair by the fireplace and pushed it back towards Daniel. She sat down, never taking her eyes off this man who had to be her brother. What could she say? Where to begin? "Are you Daniel Henson?" she asked. "Of course," the man replied. "And what's your name?" "Lydia." "Lydia Henson," Lydia replied. "Ah," said Daniel. Why did Lydia get the feeling that she had been expecting that answer? "How old are you?" Daniel asked. 12. How old are you? 47. The memory of Daniel at 10 years old popped into Lydia's head. She could see him sitting at the dinner table, grinning fiendishly as he ate with his mouth wide open. The image faded to be replaced by the man in front of her. It was impossible to believe. And yet, here she was, sitting next to her grown-up brother. "Daniel," Lydia said slowly. "You're my brother Daniel. Who sent you? The Resistance?" Daniel's smile was encouraging. Lydia frowned at him. "No one sent me." Daniel studied her face closely. "Who operated on your face to make you look like my sister?" Lydia was shocked. "No one." "They did a very good job, whoever it was," said Daniel. "That's why I had you brought in here. You look exactly like my sister when she was your age." "I am your sister, Danny. And I need your help to get back to my own time." Lydia pulled her chair closer to her brother. "I'm still trying to figure out exactly what they thought they'd achieve by changing your face to look like Lydia's," Daniel mused. "Did they really think I'd believe that you were my sister? The Resistance must be getting desperate." "Danny, I am your sister. I promise." "I went to the moors. It was raining and I was hit by a pony and a storm caught me and whirled me around. Even to Lydia's ears it sounded like she was rambling. Then I woke up to all this. You've got to believe me. It's the truth." "Prove it," Daniel smiled. Lydia didn't like his smile. Not one little bit. It was the smile of someone who was saying one thing and thinking something very different. "How?" Lydia asked nervously. "What was my nickname for you when we were kids?" Daniel asked. "You didn't have a nickname for me," Lydia frowned. Daniel raised his eyebrows. "Unless you mean that you used to call me Liddy, but that's not really a nickname." Very slowly, Daniel started to clap. "I see you've done your homework," he smiled. "What happened to you? Why are you like this? You're my brother, but not the one I remember." Lydia shook her head. "And what brother do you remember?" Daniel scorned. "The Danny I knew was the only one to stand up for me. When the school sports cup was found in my locker and everyone thought I was a thief," Lydia replied. "He was special. He wouldn't have grown up to be you." Daniel's oily smile had vanished now. Instead, a deep frown turned down the corners of his mouth and his eyes were narrowed as he studied Lydia. Lydia couldn't stand it any longer. She leapt out of the chair. Why are you like this? Why are you so horrible? If you really were my sister, you'd know why, and you'd thank me, Daniel said coldly. I don't understand, said Lydia. I don't understand anything in this place. I want to go home. Tell me how to get home. You're my brother. You should know. Why? Because you grew up with me, Lydia said, bewildered. I don't think I live here in Tarrage, Hensel, with you anymore because no one knows about me. Fran's dad said no one knows what happened to me. So tell me, where am I? What happened to me? How did I get home to my own time? You must know. I've had enough of this act. Who are you? Daniel's expression gave Lydia frostbite. She took a hasty step back, banging into her chair. I am your sister. Why won't you believe me? What happened to me? You really want to know what happened to you? Daniel asked, his voice so quiet that Lydia had to strain to hear him. Her blood ran icy cold in her body. Something was wrong, very wrong. She could see that from the look on Daniel's face. Follow me, Lydia Henson. Daniel stood up abruptly. Without another word, he strode across the room and keyed in a password on the console beside the patio windows. The windows slid apart silently. Daniel strode out into the moonlit night. Lydia had to trot to keep up with him. He was walking so fast. She looked at him. He was so much taller than her. He was her brother. Something deep within her told her that, but he'd changed so much. Daniel opened the gate and walked into a secluded part of the garden, surrounded by a tall hedge. A large, light-coloured marble tower dominated the view ahead of them. It sat on a plinth, surrounded by lights which shone up on it. Lydia's steps faltered. There was something about that tower, something which made her want to stay put and not get any closer to it. Even with the lights around its base, it still looked overpowering, forbidding, like a malevolent giant just waiting to snatch her up. Lydia looked up at Daniel, her heart sledgehammering in her chest. It's a monument, a memorial. Go and look at it, Daniel said, silkily. I don't want to. Go and read it, Daniel ordered. You're not my sister, and this monument proves you're a liar. Go on, look. Trembling, Lydia turned and moved slowly towards the structure. She bent down close to read the words engraved deeply into the light-coloured marble, illuminated by the surrounding floodlights. Lydia Angela Henson, beloved daughter of Ben and Roxanne Henson. Beloved sister of Daniel, lest we forget. Lydia's voice trailed off into a shocked silence. In that moment, the whole world froze. My sister is dead. She was killed by the people in this town, Daniel said quietly. So why don't you tell me again how you're my sister?